Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Service, and I'm looking across at a man so honorable, he mentors himself. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man whose best ally and worst enemy is dessert. I figured I would just take a hard left at the end there.
Yeah, that was a hard left.
Yeah. Well, Garrett, it's good to be back in the podcast studio with just us. As much as
We've had some fantastic guests.
Amazing. Dude, we had like 3 power guests in a row. And I got to say, I really enjoyed it. Like, I learned a lot from each of them, which I love that. That's my learner. I took massive notes in my own reflection time. And actually, something that Pastor Keith said is what spawned like this episode. So I'm very excited to get into this today.
Boom.
Boom. And this episode is going to teach, is basically to show you who you should take advice from and who you should model. And we're going to get into that more.
There's a lot of bad advice out there.
I believe everything I see on the internet, and so far it has not steered me wrong.
Unfortunately, there's not just a lot of bad advice. There's also a lot of well-intended bad advice.
Oh, most of it. I mean, look, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say. Well, let me tell you about some time whenever I did not apply wisdom in how the advice that I took. So very early on, if you listen to this podcast, like Garrett's grown into a brother, but when we first started this podcast, he was still very much like mentor coach for me. And you can hear that in the early episodes because I'm like, I felt like in some ways I was getting free sessions, and they were way more expensive than whenever I just paid you to coach me.
Got to pay some way.
Hey, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm paying my price, and I'm good with that. But and I still learn things from you for sure. That to me, you're a guy I hold in high regard and very much respect and honor, and so I'll always listen to what you have to say. Doesn't mean I'll take it on board because now you say a lot more stuff just for your own amusement. But at this time,
I haven't steered you wrong yet.
No, you haven't. And truthfully, for people out there, and especially for men, because I think a lot of men struggle with this. There's a time in your development when you identify a model or a mentor or somebody that you're going to follow where you need to just listen to what they say, whether you understand it or not. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a phase of life. And so I was in this phase. So Garrett introduced the term to me, FTFI, which is, what's that stand for, G?
Failure to follow instructions.
And G, hammered this in.
It's one of the... In SEAL training, it's one of the most egregious sins that you can commit.
Well, and it's also in Garrett's life. It's one of the most egregious sins that you can commit because you're hard, specifically on us in Mighty Men or just anything that we do.
Yeah. Well, wisdom is hard, right? It's hard to know what to do, but if you can't do what you're told, man.
Yeah, that's what you call level 1 wisdom. Some things are don't sleep with prostitutes.
Yeah.
Great.
Proverbs gives it to us a lot.
Proverbs gives us straight.
Don't do this.
Yeah, don't do it.
If you do that, you are not smart.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Garrett had this, and so FTFI, you may be like, oh yeah, that's funny. Like, he didn't have to ever tell me not to sleep with prostitutes, but there was plenty of things when he was like, dude, I told you to take this cone and put them 7 feet apart. How far apart is this one? Oh, well, no, that's not 7 feet. Like, it's that kind of stuff. Like, if we're out, we both lead Mighty Men, and we're out with 150 dudes at a camping trip. Those details matter because you think through why you have us do stuff.
I'm giving you deliberate instruction.
Correct. So this was at a stage when I was like, okay, FTFI is an important thing, and it still is to me. Like, I'm still very much like if someone is in command and I know that they're in command for the reason they tell me to do something, I need to follow that because that's how command works, and that's what makes us all better. Well, I did not have the wisdom to apply that the fact that I was learning from somebody who was worth following and in a situation that was like that. So I go out and I go parachuting. And you may remember this. If you're a longtime listener, you probably don't remember this. Remember I told Garrett, I'm going to go parachuting. And he's like, oh, sweet. I'm going to go jump out of a plane, skydiving. It's like, awesome. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be with Tandem. And he's like, oh, you could literally be asleep. He could not have been less impressed. Well, armed with my FTFI attitude, I go out, and Garrett has a lot of opinions about these instructors. One of which he one time we had him on FaceTime.
And said it might be a little more well-founded than just opinions.
That's true. One time, anyways, these guys live a life that, shall we say, is more suited for a party lifestyle that they then also happen to know how to skydive. Like, they're typically some dude that is like from overseas, maybe enjoys some enjoys recreational drugs, and like is not really necessarily going a place that I want to go in life. I'll just say it respectfully. Well,
if people are, I would say the most similar type of culture that people are familiar with from pop culture and media is surfers.
Right.
And it's similar to a surf culture.
Right. So not somebody that I need to be going FTFI, but I was so wired in on FTFI, I was like, yeah, check, whatever. So I went with my best friend, James. We went skydiving. He jumps out of the plane first, right, and is below me. And then I go out, and so we open, you open your canopy, and you're floating. Well, this guy goes, hey, do you want to take the canopy? I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. I'm having a great time. So he's like, hey, if you pull down to the right, we'll start corkscrewing. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I pull down to the right, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to stop because I have not been told to. And we're like swirling around this thing. And then he's like, hey, you can let up on that thing if you want to. And so I waited until he told me. And by the time I let up on it, we were way below James. Like I landed way earlier than James because we just corkscrewed down. And there's a lot
that's how you get down fast.
Well, it is. It's also how you get a lot of G forces. So like I literally started sweating profusely immediately. And like the last, I don't even know how long it took us to get to the ground, was not, I had been envisioning that moment of like looking around and taking in God's creation. And instead I was like, dude, I think I might hurl. Now I did not hurl, which I'm very proud of, but I got to the ground and I was like sketchy for at least 45 minutes because I don't know how many G's you can get in one of those turns, but I was just like,
get a couple.
Yeah, well, I got them. Because in my mind, I was like, yeah, FTFI. That was a great way of taking a lesson I'd learned and not identifying whether I should apply it to the person speaking to me.
Yeah.
And we're going to get more into why that is because, like we said, this is
So what you're saying is your instructor or the person that you were riding on their chest is a little bit less intentional in the instruction that they're giving.
100%. Because I think because I asked James, I'm like, dude, did they let you do that? He's like, yeah. And I just kind of I did one and then I stopped. Whereas for me, I'm like, no, I will not stop until you tell me to. And that, almost made me see my breakfast. So there's a fun FTFI story, but like we're going to get into this, and the whole goal of this episode is we're going to show you how you can, like what Pastor Keith said last week really spawned this. And we're going to show you how you can learn from literally anyone. We're also going to show you how to identify people you should model and how you should identify people you can take advice from. And so there's some very clear distinctions here. And what we're hoping is that if you're the type of person that you know where and how you can learn from anyone, you are going to grow massively. So if you're a learner.
And honestly, I think the biggest thing that can happen here is when you take advice from the wrong people, it can actually be really expensive.
That's very true.
You can go down the wrong roads. You can make some poor choices and with good intentions.
Yeah. I think about a few stock recommendations I've had from friends that have cost me, dearly. And that's a great example. Anyways, so I heard this saying once and I really like it. It's show me your heroes and I'll show you your future. And if you think about it, from the time that we're born, like I was listening to, I'm not going to go into it, but I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk about how so much of the world is just seen in story, and we're always looking through a main aim, and it's through modeling. And he talked about this extensively. And this is something that I'm interested in because I've thought about this as well, and I see this all the time. From the time you're born, you learn how to walk, talk, interact. Like your whole map of the world is from who? Your parents or whoever's raising you. That is literally, so we are built with modeling software in us. We are meant to look, observe, and learn. That's how we grow. And I've thought about this before because if you know my story, a couple decades, well, not even a couple decades, but like a decade plus ago, I was a very different person. I was depressed. I was just lost. I was lacking purpose. And I thought about this. I was like, who were my heroes back then? You know what my heroes were? It was Jimi Hendrix. It was the Beatles. It was the Rolling Stones, and it was Bob Dylan.
Nice.
Right. Now, look, I still love
great musicians.
I love all of their music, but show me your heroes and I'll show you your future. What were they into? They were into like lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, lots of music, and lots of women. And it killed Jimmy.
If that's what you want your legacy to be,
Right. Well, fortunately, that wasn't what I wanted my legacy to be. But I was modeling them. I was looking up to them because I liked the music. Mm-hmm. I had no idea about all the other stuff, and I was just kind of like, oh man, So I fast forward, you get your life in order, and I remember then I started my heroes changed, right? I started adding guys like Tony Robbins was a hero, Tim Ferriss was a hero of mine for a time. Now my heroes are very different. Tony Robbins will probably still be in there. Jesus, obviously my Lord and Savior, that's my ultimate hero. But like guys like Pastor Keith, I have different people in there that I look up to now, and it's worth noting that because I don't have a heroes wall. I had Michael Jordan's poster on my wall. I don't have posters of my heroes now because I'm not a little kid. But the way this works when you're an adult is you'll be like, man, this guy's cool. You'll just think someone's cool, or you'll like a person. Like, man, I follow this guy on Instagram, or I like watching this guy's YouTube channels. What you're doing is you're creating more models for yourself, whether you know it or not.
Right.
And so the quote that spawned this whole thing from none other than Pastor Keith Craft was, he said, he's like, I made up my mind at a young age that I would learn from everybody, that everybody would be my teacher. Yep. And that's an amazing thing to say, but it's you have to walk that out with wisdom. Or like you said, you're going to end up taking advice from anybody. And then, like I said, I've taken stock advice from people that knew nothing about stocks, but they're like, I'm making money. And then guess what? The stock tanked and you lose it. That's, that happens. But that happens all the time. And we don't realize because we're not very good. A lot of people, they haven't been taught how to model, or they haven't been taught how to identify good advice, bad advice, and where you can learn. They're just floating around trying to figure it out.
Well, you don't take advice from people just because they care about you.
Right.
And
yeah,
that's
true.
Unfortunate. Like people who have your best intention doesn't mean that they can give you the best advice.
Yeah. And I don't even know if you have my best intention, if I'm being honest.
That's not true.
I know, dude. I do know that. So, G, what's the difference between lessons and advice? Because there is a difference.
Well, lessons are things that you learn from people. Lessons allow it allows you to build a model. If you've learned a lesson, you've either gone through an experience or someone has taught something to you, and that allows you to say, like, in similar circumstances, I can apply these things. Mm-hmm. Right? Versus advice is someone just telling you what you should do. Right. You didn't really learn anything. It's really someone just giving you a suggestion. And so advice, you have to filter that somebody gives you through who's giving the advice.
Very good. Whereas lessons, you can, because you can learn what not to do and learn a lesson from somebody that wasn't even trying to teach it from you. So you can learn lessons from anyone. Advice, you need to be a lot more, you need to filter it a lot better. And fortunately, we're going to give you the filters. So Garrett loves this sort of stuff, and I appreciate your scientific mind. I swear Garrett could classify something really complex into like 4 categories. It does. Like I wish we could have people prompt your brain, because we've tried to do some complex stuff here before, and you've categorized it very impressively.
Well, and that's a bit like, honestly, complexity comes from there's usually just 2 to 3 dynamic factors working together. If you like, I won't go down like a math road for you, but when you go from 1 factor to 2 factor to 3 factors, your level of options like massively grow. And most things, like most categories in life and most dynamic elements, is really just 2 factors at play. And so when you can understand what are the 2 factors at play here, like what 2 scales are working together at the same time, it's really easy to classify things. I don't find a lot of things that it's like what we're going to get into today is really like a 2-factor equation. Right. There's 2 scales, working independently of each other. And if you can map what both of those scales are, it's really easy to just... like next week, we're going to go do legacy navigators, right? And we're going to teach people how to navigate. And one of the things that I'm going to, everyone's familiar with the term triangulate, right?
Course,
and angulation is, it's a vector, right? From me to another point. What I'm saying today is like most things are really just a biangulation. There's 2 angulations. There's 2 scales upon which a force is moving. And if you can figure out what both of those scales are, it's so easy to see this is where we are. This is the way this works. But if you try to you don't understand the 2 forces at play, and you're just trying to like, why is it like this? Why is it like this? It's really hard because you have 2 different things working at the same time. So that's kind of a complex answer just to say that I think that's the way that you classify things.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and I'm hoping for people listening that they're kind of like, okay, I get that, but the math example helps. So we're going to get into this. We created a quadrant, which we love, and we'll get to that in a second. But there's a couple, like, the whole point of this is we want you to identify who you should model. That's really what we want, like who's worth following, who's worth taking their advice from, and how you apply this. But there's a couple presuppositions, and presupposition meaning like these are things that you have to already have in place, right? Like these have to be established. So number 1, you have to know what you want. Right?
Yeah, and that changes over time. But
it does.
Even when you were talking about who your heroes were,
right.
At that time, what you wanted was
wanted my band to make it.
Musical glory.
And so those guys made sense, but I didn't realize all the other junk that came with it, right? And so you have to know what you want.
As you grew, what you wanted changed.
Exactly. And here's what I did not have at that time was established authority. And what I mean by that, you have to decide what's true. Right. And we've talked, I remember when you said that, like in our Lost series, you said you need to know what you have certainty about. And that was one of those, you say things sometimes and I feel like they jump out at me and I remember them. I remember exactly when you said that, because I thought that is so crucial to know what you're certain about. And so for us, our established authority is the Word of God.
It's your foundation, right? It's when I interviewed Dan Crenshaw years ago at a fundraiser, and I asked him, what is religion? What's the role of religion in the life of a political leader? And he said, well, what you can know about me is that the decisions that I make are based upon the Word of God. And that Word of God doesn't change.
Yeah.
So my decision-making process won't change. And so what will change is what you want in life, but hopefully you can find where you know what your truth is, you know what your center is. And for us on this podcast, it's the Word of God. That's not going to change. And so that it gives a lot of stability to my life, and it allows me to filter out what we're going to talk about today. What is a teacher? What is a hero? What is a mentor? it's the truth is one of those factors.
Right. And for a lot of people, they would say that like science or logic would be they probably wouldn't say that's my established authority, because that's very much a term we've put in place to help understand this concept. But that's how a lot of people roll, is they're like, well, let me see the proof. Let me see what science says. Let me see what the experts say, which is really a way of saying, let me see what knowledge and science say. Well, here's the problem. Those change all the time. Knowledge and science back in the 50s were like, hey, smoke cigarettes. It'll help you stay awake. Right? Like that's concerning. Right. And we could go down a COVID route here.
But you could also buy morphine at Walgreens.
Right. Could you really?
Yeah.
Wow. Man, America was a wild ride. I didn't know that. Okay. Anyways. All right. Let's get into our beloved quadrant. And I say beloved because I know how much you love these things. This is I'm going to say it the way I'm going to defer to you out of honor. This is the truth and fruit quadrant. Okay. Yes. Which
those are the two factors.
Right.
So understanding what is just overall zoomed out, looking at what we're talking about today, the two factors that are going to help you determine who should I listen to, who should I take advice from, how do I know what to do in a situation. You're going to look at what is truth, right? Nick gave us the two presuppositions, right? You need to know what you want. You need to know what your established authority.
Yes.
Our established authority is truth. More specifically, our established authority is the Word of God. That's a factor for us. The second factor is fruit. And what is fruit? Fruit is what we're all, and this is fruit through a biblical definition, right? Fruit is like that you're bearing proof of who you are on the inside. Fruit is also looking at someone's life and saying, do I want what they want?
Right.
Right. Fruit is like, if you want to be successful and someone is making money, owns businesses, well, that's fruit that you want, right? I want the fruit that you have. But what the most important thing, we want to listen to people who have both truth and fruit. But
it's the visible is what it is. Because if you think about, if a lot of people couldn't identify an orange or an apple tree, but when you see the fruit, that's how you know. So that's a very obvious supernatural natural correlation of what we're saying here.
So let's start by just taking this quadrant and identifying the four sections.
Yeah.
And what we like to do is typically when we do quadrants like this, we'll give a role or a title to that.
Right.
And there's four different types of people, right? So the first person is someone who has no fruit and no truth, right? They don't live by the authority that you live by, and this person also does not have the fruit that you want to have. Correct. These people also love giving advice.
They're always ready.
They love to tell you what you should do.
Always ready.
And this person is labeled the fool. They have no fruit and no truth, and they want to give you their advice.
Very good.
Right? These are people you should not listen to. These are people you should not imitate.
Right. And we're going to get into that a little bit more.
Right. The second group we're going to talk about is people who have fruit, people who have what you want.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the first thing really, growing up in life, the first people you start to identify is some of this.
Right.
Right. Like the first people I started looking at is not the next category we're going to talk about here in a second. The first people I started looking at in life when I was young is people who had what I thought I wanted.
Right.
The fruit.
That's exactly right.
Right. That first one for me was Batman. It's like, I want to be Batman. I want what he has. Right. So
you still want to be Batman.
I wouldn't say I've stopped trying to be Batman. I'm trying to be a different Batman. Like, they haven't written that. There's a few different versions of Batman. I don't think they've written my version of Batman, but anyways, heroes are, so fools, no fruit, no truth. Heroes are people who demonstrate the fruit that you want.
Right.
Right. So you can have business heroes. You can have life heroes. You can have fitness heroes, right? These are people who have the fruit that you want. And so heroes don't necessarily, I'm not saying they don't have any truth, but in your, you have to define what the fruit that you want is, what the truth that you live by is. And so, for example, like a guy like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Fitness hero to basically everyone. Right. But not everyone lives by the same truth that Arnold Schwarzenegger lives by. Right. Yeah. And if you watch Arnold's documentary, which I loved watching, there's a really sad part about his family.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Right. It's like, so I should listen to Arnold about fitness. Right. And I did when I was in ninth grade, really getting into the gym. I read his stuff about working out. It's like, you should listen to this guy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I do everything that he does.
Right.
Right. But in the area that he has fruit that I want, there's things that I can learn from him.
Very good.
But also I have to be aware that, and this isn't necessarily the way that I was thinking then. It was just like his book about fitness. So his book on fitness wasn't also giving marriage advice. So I wasn't worried about that.
Right.
But I was clear that I could listen to him in the areas that he had fruit that I wanted to have fruit in.
Yeah. And we're going to give some more examples and go into some of the specifics here of the pitfalls and different things. But right now we just want to establish how we've identified these.
I'll leave that there. That's heroes.
Yeah.
Next group. So heroes have fruit. They don't necessarily have truth. The next type of person, right? And again, this is the quadrant, right? So fools, no fruit, no truth. Heroes, fruit, no truth. Next role is a teacher. And teachers are truth, but they don't have the fruit.
Right.
Teachers can teach you what's right. This would be someone who, like, they're not in shape, but they have they have a doctorate and, whatever would be the right type of doctorate to be an expert at getting in shape or losing weight or fitness or functional strength, whatever it is. They have a doctorate in that. Like, I'm extremely educated. I know all of it. There's no fruit of it in my life,
right?
But I can teach you the information.
Correct.
And with teachers, what they're teaching you is true, but you don't, like, when it starts to get into application, that's where you have to really reason,
right.
Are you giving me sound advice here?
Yeah.
Because your information is accurate. You have the right source of truth, right? You, like, for fitness, for nutrition, science is a great form of truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can stand on that in fitness and biology and things like that. But when a teacher starts to tell you, now this is how you should do it, but they don't do it, you can't follow that.
Right.
Right.
Exactly
so
right.
That's the difference between, heroes and teachers. Teachers have all of the information, at least in a specific domain, but you're not necessarily going to apply it the way that they apply it,
right.
or look at their life, or just because, you have all of the answers, you don't do what that person does. If I had a teacher who was an expert in fitness, right? I would learn about fitness from him. But when he starts telling me what the perfect fitness routine is, I'm not going to replicate that because he has no fruit in his life.
Right. Very good.
Right. And so you've got to understand who teachers are in your life. They have great information and things that you can learn from, things that you want to put in your own information
they have
center.
truth. Yeah.
But when they start telling you, here's what you should do.
Yeah. That's
what you have to be careful of that.
Exactly right. Yeah. And then the last one, G?
The last role, right? So fools, no fruit, no truth. Heroes, all fruit. Teachers, all truth. And then we have mentors who have both truth and fruit. And these are people who live by the authority that you live by, and they have the fruit that you want to have in their life. And these are people that when they give you advice, you should absolutely do it.
You can model
You'll have many heroes. You'll have many teachers. And this is scripture. It's 1 Corinthians. You can pull up I don't remember which verse, but it's 1 Corinthians. You have many teachers, but few fathers. And fathers are similar to mentors. We'll talk about that a little bit later, the difference between fathers and mentors. But fathers and mentors are similar. You'll have many teachers. You'll have many heroes, but you will have few mentors. And mentors are the chosen people in your life. Because what do you do when you have a hero that's saying you should do this, and a teacher that's saying you should do this, and you have a mentor that's saying you should do this, and they're different? You need to listen to your mentor. Your mentor is the person that you've chosen, right? Like, you have lots of heroes, they come and go. You have lots of teachers, they come and go, and you can learn from so many different types of people. But you're going to have few mentors, just because they're the rarest. People that have an overlap of the truth that you live by and the fruit that you want to have.
Right.
And if you get the opportunity to have a relationship with someone like that, when that person gives you advice, you need to heed it.
Yeah.
Right? They're telling you, here's what you should do.
Yeah, really hear that, because if you're a person that, like, you have decisions in your life, and that's literally everybody listening to this, you will no doubt have sought, I will say counsel, but sometimes you're not like, hey, I need to speak to you. Sometimes you're just like, hey, what's going on? I've got these things going on. And what happens, especially for guys like to fix stuff. If you're just hanging out with your friends and you're watching sports or whatever you're doing, and you're just catching up, you're going to say what's going on in your life, and unsolicited or not, someone's going to be like, dude, you know what you should do, bro? You should try XYZ, this guy that I know, he did, or whatever it may be. And what you're getting right there is you're getting advice. And if you don't have what Garrett just said, if you don't really have a way to identify whether this is good advice or not, you know what you're going to do? And I'm speaking to someone who's done this, you're going to go, that sounds like you're right. And so this other guy, so he did it. Yeah. What was his situation? Oh, very similar to mine. Well, yeah, I'm going to try that. And this is how people decide to do diet plans or workout plans or even greater things, like they move. You hear sometimes about people, I'm like, how'd you end up in the city? Man, I was just there one day. My friend said he was going, so I was just like, yeah, man, I'll go too. You moved your whole life because just somebody there came and gave you some unsolicited advice and sold you on it? And it happens all the time.
One of the things that sparked this...
By the way, 1 Corinthians 4:15. I just wanted to reference it for the crowd.
1 Corinthians 4:15, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that sparked this, I sent this to Nick the other day. I saw this video. It's honestly a disappointing video. I saw this video of David Goggins, who I have a ton of respect for in certain capacity. David Goggins giving someone at a speaking event David's at stands up and asks for, hey, Q&A time, let's ask for advice. And he asked Goggins for advice about his marriage, and that, he was struggling with his wife, and she was thinking about filing for divorce, and he was like, hey, what should I do? And Goggins' advice was effer. That's what he said. Mm-hmm. And what's disappointing, if you want to know how to be a great endurance athlete, you should do exactly what David Goggins says.
For sure.
You also have to understand, when you look at his whole life, that it may cost things that you don't want to give up.
For sure.
Right? The best person you could listen to is someone who's a great endurance athlete, but then also had all the other fruit that you wanted in your life and lived by the same truth as you.
Yeah.
This puts David Goggins in the hero category. He's absolutely a hero to so many people. He has fruit in an area of resiliency, of grit, of mindset in so many ways in his life that people want what he has. They don't see it, just like his book, Can't Hurt Me. People want that. People want to get to a place where they're not suffering.
Right.
And so he's a great person to listen to in that. He's not a great person to listen to from a relationship aspect. He will not help you have a great marriage. He doesn't know. He doesn't know how to do that. Yeah. He does not have the fruit of that in his life. And so when you ask someone who's a hero in one capacity, it's the same, right? Like Arnold's absolutely a great hero. He's probably a hero to. He's probably one of the top heroes of people that are alive today, of how many people he's been a hero to.
Yeah.
Right. But don't ask him for marriage advice.
Right.
And he's even said that. Like, he says it in his book, right? Like, I can't help people with that. Like, I've struggled with it. Mm-hmm. And so what I wanted to do with this podcast is help people understand, who do you listen to? Where do I get advice? What's the right advice to listen to? How do I utilize my heroes? How do I utilize my teachers? How do I choose my mentors?
Yeah, and I really hope you catch what Garrett just said, because we touched on how when you're wired to model from a young age.
Yeah.
And what we're giving you here is a mature person's modeling. Because if you keep doing it like you did when you were a kid, where you just do everything you see your parents do, I mean, that's why
it's the first way you learn.
Yeah.
When you're young, you just learn by imitation.
Right.
I just do what you do.
Yeah.
Only when you mature do you start to build these models where you can look at people and say, okay, I see how part of what you're doing is valuable. I see how part of what you said is valuable. But that doesn't fit into the whole picture of what I want with my life.
Yeah, and I didn't really think about this when we were planning it, but literally this podcast started because I heard someone giving advice on happiness that is a very well-known podcaster that I did not think was suited to talk about that as much as they're suited to talk about other things.
The inception story of this podcast is a hero of yours.
Yeah, and I was like, man, I don't think he should be giving out advice, but I know somebody who should. And that was how The Impossible Life came to be, was literally that thought process. I hadn't even thought about that till now. And, there's that famous saying that we all know, G, which is like, never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
And I'll give a quick story about this. That's fun because I remember, so I don't talk about my accomplishments a ton, just in general. It's just, I don't think it's, for whatever reason, I just don't think it's the kind of thing that ever comes across well. If you're like, hey, let me tell you what I've done. There's a time and place for it if you're pitching somebody, but typically I'm not pitching people. So I brought a baseball brand from completely unknown to being, it's G-Form baseball, to being worn by some of the biggest names in baseball. I mean, at one point we had Mookie Betts, Pete Alonso,
Mookie Betts,
Carlos Correa.
Every time I go to a baseball game, Nick is like, "Oh yeah, I know that player. Oh, I helped sign that player to G-Form."
There's so many. So like, I literally took this brand from like nobody knew it to like it's in MLB The Show. Like I got it on a video game, which is actually one of my favorite accomplishments, and like just got to go meet and get it on so many amazing baseball players. So very proud of that. That's not the point of the story. Early on in this, we partnered with a company called Perfect Game, who I love. Like they are the place to go. Pretty much every player that you see in the draft that's from America has played Perfect Game events. Like they are the scouting organization and showcase service for anybody that's going to be a pro baseball player or even play college. And so you go to this big pinnacle event, which is called the All-American every year. And this is the top 55 high school baseball players. You'll go meet these guys when they're 17, 18 years old, going into their senior year. And then next year, I'll watch them go get drafted and get like $8 million guarantee.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I watched that guy like be an absolute yahoo with the ping pong, playing ping pong. And now he's like, on ESPN. It's crazy. But so when I was doing that, man, I'm bringing this like no-name brand into this big environment. And guess who's there? Rawlings, who are also someone I work with now, thankfully. Nike was there at the time, and the Nike guys were like the big boys. So you go into these player lounges, and it's like ridiculous. These players get hooked up with so much free stuff, and we were there to provide some swag as well. But like Nike has like custom cleats. They have like all these cool T-shirts. They have the swoosh, like this big brand identity. And I'm competing with that, and I'm like, dude, what am I, like I found ways. I won't go into it here, but I found ways to compete because I identified my strategic advantages. But the time I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool to work for Nike? Like, I would love that. So I was like seeing what they were doing for these kids and going, dude, that would just be amazing. So finally, like the first year I didn't meet anybody from Nike. The second year they're like, oh, this guy from Nike's going to be here. So in my mind, I'm like, oh man, this is my shot. Like, I want to go meet this guy. Yeah. Maybe if he sees my work, like I might end up at Nike baseball. Wouldn't that be amazing? So this is what's going through my head. So this guy shows up. I meet him. I'm like, okay, hey. And they're like, hey, we're all going to go out. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I'm going to go out with the Nike guy because I want to, like, hopefully build some rapport. So, like, this is what's in my mind, honestly. Well, I hadn't really talked to him much. So then I start talking to him much. And as I'm talking, I'm like, this guy is, I'll just say he was underwhelming. And he thought that it was better to go do what is now a legal drug in California. He basically went and smoked a bunch of weed and never made it out with us because he overdid it. And this was the guy that I was holding in such high regard.
Oh, man.
And it went from, oh, I think this guy's great to, oh, you actually just work at a great company and you're not responsible for why this is so cool at all. And it was, I remembered it at the time. I didn't have the wisdom that we're sharing here, but I knew at the time, I was like, okay, that's a lesson for me to learn about big companies and the difference. But it was really disappointing. And there's a saying like that. I mean, you talk to people, they're like, never meet your heroes. Everybody has that story about like, I met this person and man, he was such a jerk to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So they say that. But anyways, let's get into a little bit more of this, G, because I want to give people more examples. And I want to talk about so when Pastor Keith said that he would make everyone his teacher, this is where even a fool, which remember, the fools which have no fruit, no truth, they are the most common. These are the guys that sit next to you at if you're in the bus stop, if you're at the airport, you're just standing in line, you're working with these people.
Right.
These are people everywhere, and they will offer you advice unsolicited about all sorts of things all the time.
And really, it doesn't necessarily mean so much that they're the fool. Those people may have fruit in some other area of life. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
You're the fool for listening to them.
100%.
Because they don't have any fruit that you want.
Right.
And they don't live by the truth that you live by. You may like that person. You may respect that person. They may have fruit in another area of your life, right? But you don't want fruit in that area.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great point, G. I was saying people in your bus stop or whatever, like a lot of people ride the bus. But these are your neighbors. These are the people you work with. These are your kids' parents, like that are your friend. Your kids are friends, so you get around these people.
This could be your boss at work.
Yeah.
He could be very successful, right? But he doesn't have the fruit that you want in your life.
Right.
And he's not living by the truth that you live by. So he's someone that you report to. He's someone that you work for. He tells you what to do. But when it comes to here's what you should do with your life category, maybe not the person that you should listen to. You're the fool for listening to someone who doesn't have fruit that you want or live by the truth.
Exactly right. And so let me tell you how you can get crushed on this one is if you don't recognize them for that. So when I was 18, I was working. Funnily enough, my first office job was at an interior design company in San Diego. And what do you have at interior design companies? Not a lot of men. So I was working in the accounting department with just women everywhere. It was in some respects it was like kind of crazy, and in other respects, I was not married at the time. It was also very great, but I had a girlfriend, and I remember this guy came in, and he was from the Marines, and so because he was in accounting as well, he latched on to me because there was only I think we were the only two dudes. There was us, and there was one other guy, but they didn't really get along as well, and so he was fresh out of the Marine Corps. He called me Devil Dog, which is like how they refer to each other, and of course my grandfather was a decorated Marine, so I was like, I know a lot about the Marine Corps, and I just liked working out with the guy. He was funny, and we got along really well. He was older as well, so I think he saw himself as a mentor to me. Well, he was obviously there's a lot of women around. I've got a girlfriend, and there was there's interest, and I declined it because I had a girlfriend, and that's not who I was. I'm a loyal guy. And this guy vehemently pushed me in the opposite direction and was like, dude, you're an idiot. You shouldn't be passing this stuff up. Like, here's my number. This is he actually gave me his parents' number and said, I promise you one day you're going to regret the decisions that you made. And when you do, call me on this number. I think that's what he gave me. Like, I left with that piece of paper in my wallet. Certain. He was so certain. But I knew at the time, I'm like, without having this knowledge, I listened to how he talked about his wife. I listened to some of the things he said about other women. And I was like, this guy.
I don't think that's what I want.
That's exactly right. But you know what would have? But if I did like him. I genuinely enjoyed. We spent hours together working out during every week for like a year and a half. So this was it wasn't like I was like, oh, forget that guy. I liked him, and there was other things we would talk about. Like, yeah, that's a good point. We talk about business, and I was like, okay, so he was a friend.
Yeah.
But this is what we're saying. You're the fool if you haven't identified the fruit and the truth. Which in this case, he was zero. I'll say, I was going to say negative, but he was zero on both of those.
Yeah.
Thank God. Thank God I had the upbringing and the morality to say, yeah, this isn't a guy I should follow. But otherwise, you can be like, you know what? I like this guy. He's right. Maybe he's right.
Yeah. If you don't have this framework, you will listen to people like that.
Exactly. All right, G. So heroes. And so fools are the most common. Heroes are the second most common. I mean, you can have heroes. They're available everywhere, especially with social media. It's so much easier to look at someone on social and be like, oh man, look at this. I really like this guy, because you see this idealized self that's out on social media. So you can have so many heroes. They're very common.
And you can learn from heroes. Like there's pieces that you pull from them. But what happens is people try, you see your hero doing something and you just go do what they did.
Yeah.
And you don't get the same results, and you end up getting a lot of the negative results that those people also have in their life. You don't want to model them. You don't listen to your heroes and just do exactly what they did.
Yeah.
Right? They have something that you want so you can learn from them, but sometimes you're going to do things differently than them because you don't share truth.
Right.
Great example of this, and this is probably one of the most inspiring hero stories to me. It's also a vision story, is about Elon Musk. And this was early on. This was like 2000. I want to say this is like 2008, 2009, this interview. Early SpaceX years. And Elon Musk is doing a 60 Minutes interview. Actually, no, I think it was like 2011, because it was right after they launched, and I don't know their timeline perfectly, but I want to say this interview was right after they had the first successful Falcon 9 launch. They first get their first rocket up.
Yeah.
And he's doing a 60 Minutes interview. And Elon Musk is talking about Neil Armstrong and the inspiration that he's been to him. You know, like when Elon was a little boy, seeing Neil Armstrong and first man on the moon and all of that, like, man, that's my hero.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm so inspired by this person. And Elon Musk, like, he's not typically a very emotional person.
Not at all. Yeah.
But in this interview, you see him start to cry and struggle as he's talking about Neil Armstrong, and then how Neil told him that privatization of space is wrong and that it shouldn't be done, right? That this should only be done by the government. So his hero telling him, what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
Elon Musk had a dream for the privatization of Space Force, for the advancement of human civilization, like has this dream of what's possible. One of the people that inspired him in that dream is Neil Armstrong. And his hero said, what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
And he did it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because he understood that Neil's inspired me. Neil is a hero for me, but Neil is not my mentor.
Yeah.
Doesn't live by the truth that I live by. And he's not like, I'm not going where he went.
Yeah.
He's a hero to me, but that doesn't mean I want to become him.
Right. You don't model him, but you can still learn from him. And this is really the unlock of this, because now who can you learn from? Everybody. And you're going to fast forward your development in life, because if you can learn from everybody, I mean, how many lessons and how much time around the mountain are you saving yourself? I mean, this is like an infinite learning unlock. Did I just coin a new phrase, maybe? Although I don't have a cool saying. I'll have to think about that one off air. Anyways. But yeah, and the third most common is teachers, right? And similarly to heroes, you don't want to model teachers, right, G?
Yeah.
I mean, because these are people...
You learn from them, but you don't model them.
Right, and these are people we said, they're high on truth, but not on fruit. And there's a lot of people. So I'll give you an example of where I saw this in my own life. So
you know what? Talk to your teachers about your heroes and see what they say, right?
Yeah,
because they'll have an opinion of, well, that they're going to take what they see in that hero that you're talking about and help give some lesson, help give some knowledge, help give some truth to it.
Yeah,
right. But where the teacher, where they start to walk down a path, right? Teachers are for the classroom.
Right.
They're not going to be the ones who are going to model for you.
Right. And what we said earlier is they're knowledge, not application. Those were your words, and it's 100% accurate. So you may know this about me if you listen to this podcast much. Like I'm an NLP guy, neuro-linguistic programming. I love psychology. I think it's very fascinating. And so I went to an NLP license course to get I can't remember what the license was, but I got the practitioners. It was the NLP practitioners license course. And so when I went there, I sat down and I'll be honest, it was a wonderful course. They just had one recently here in Dallas, and it was a great course. And so when I went there, I was, I'm there to learn. And these people are very experienced NLP practitioners. In one case, the guy was like the son of a very influential guy in NLP in America. Like, so, very deep knowledge, grew up in it. It's all he's ever known. And so he's teaching us, and I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm like, man, this is so good. And like for them, NLP was like the gospel, right? Like the answer to everything is NLP. And so as they're sharing with us, they start, they teach us things, but they also share about their life. And so what I start realizing as we go through is literally every instructor there was divorced and either not in a relationship at all or trying to figure it out, or, they were just in various places in their life where they had not made a relationship with somebody close to them work, but at the same time, they were super knowledgeable in NLP. And so for me, I was like, okay, these people have truth in NLP that I want to learn, but my ultimate truth is the gospel. And so there's a knowledge in the application of where and when to use NLP, because there was some things that was like, well, NLP is the answer for everything. And in my mind, I'm like, I think there's some discipline here. There's some, they would acknowledge spirituality, but not acknowledge God. So I feel like I got so much out of that course, and I would recommend it to anybody, but it wasn't because I came out of there as a robot going like, NLP is going to solve everything. Now I have the answers to life. It's because I came out and I was like, man, I just got given an incredible tool set that I can now go use skillfully because I know the creator, and I feel like I have a lot more to me to know how to apply it. But that was an example. I mean, and you may think that's harsh, but like I had to look, because they were not just saying, here's how to do NLP. They were very much going like, this is what you should do in your life. And so that's where I was like, yeah, and that's exactly right. That's where I was like, I'm not going to take your advice, but I will take the knowledge.
You don't have what I want.
That's exactly
right.
You
have the knowledge.
Right.
I came here to learn from you. I didn't come here to be like you.
That's exactly right. All right, G, and then the very last one.
And don't say that to your teachers, by the way. They won't take it very well.
I didn't say that to them because it would be dishonoring, truthfully, as well. Yeah. Because, did they want to do that? No. And I'm not judging them, nor am I looking down on them. But I just have to look at the fruit in their life. And once again, what was the presupposition, which is an NLP term? Know what you want. Yeah. And I know what I want. I want a great marriage with my wife. I want a marriage that honors God. I want kids that are gonna grow up and advance the kingdom. Like, I know what I want.
It wasn't the purpose of this, but it's also a use of this podcast. Is if see where you are on this framework, maybe for somebody else. You may be a teacher for somebody.
Yeah, very true.
And you're helping them learn. But don't get mad at them if you don't have the fruit that they want. Don't get mad at them when they don't do what you do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because there's people that like don't care for you, G, right? Yep. Like they're like, oh, Garrett's too intense or whatever. And it's like that's okay. Like you don't need them to validate you. It's like, okay, yeah, no problem. You don't have what they want, but they can take something from you that's truth that you're saying.
Absolutely.
And the same for me. So, all right, the very last one, and there's almost like a 4A or 4 or maybe 5th level. So it's mentors and fathers, and I think you're the most well-equipped person to speak about this.
Let's talk about mentors for a second, then we'll go on to fathers. Mentors are people who have the fruit that you want in their life, right? And then live by the truth that you live by. Every single one of them, and for me, like this is, you can have mentors in multiple areas. Like you can have like he's my mentor for this, or he's my mentor for this. But overall, you want those mentors to at least have some level of fruit in all of the areas that matter to you.
Yes.
Right. I don't have any mentors that have a horrible marriage. Right. I don't have any mentors that can't manage their money at all.
Right.
Some are better at money than others. Some are better at marriage than others. They all have greater strengths. I have a few mentors, and all of the mentors I have fruit in every area of my life that matters to me and live by the same truth that I live by.
Right.
And I listen to different mentors on different issues, depending upon which one is the greatest in that area. Like they all have like peak strengths and certain things that matter to me.
Because you have 3 mentors, you'd say, right?
Yeah, I have 3 key mentors. And so mentors are people that have the fruit that you want, and they live by the truth that you live by. And those people are very few. You may not even have, like, I'm extremely blessed to have not just 1, but 3 mentors that I have a relationship with. You may not have a mentor that you even have a relationship with in certain seasons of your life, right? So they're a mentor from afar to you. You get to read their books, you get to listen to them speak, but you don't have a direct relationship with them. And so that's difficult. You want to have mentors that have that. And maybe there's someone that you're like, man, I wish that person could be my mentor, but you're not at a level that you can have that person as a mentor. But maybe there is someone that lives by the truth you live by and has some of the fruit that you live by. I think about that with the people that I coach, right? There's people that I coach that I live by the truth they live by. I have the fruit that they want to have, but there may be people that they think like, man, I wish that person was my mentor.
Yeah.
Right. But they don't have the opportunity to work with that person. So I have to have the grace and understanding that look, like there's people that they may want more than me.
Yeah.
Right. But as a mentor, these are the people that have live by the truth that you want, have the fruit that you want. And when mentors speak to you, you have to choose those mentors.
Yeah.
Right. But then when mentors speak to you, it should deeply outweigh anything that you get from a hero or deeply outweigh anything that you get from a teacher.
Yeah.
And I think about that guy who was asking Goggins for marriage advice. And I think this guy needs a marriage mentor.
Yeah.
He needs someone who has the fruit that he wants, lives by the truth that he lives by. But he's asking a hero who is not someone who's a hero in marriage to give him advice because he didn't have anybody else.
Yeah, let me just jump in here real quick, G. There's something that Garrett said that's so, I hope is so encouraging to you. What we're saying is that you can be mentored by people from afar, right? And here's the thing: you can also be mentored by people who are no longer living through their books, right?
Absolutely.
Because you can, and that's very encouraging. And here's something I heard Pastor Keith say today that I think is he talked about the template for alignments is draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Mm-hmm. And so what it always has to be is that you have to be willing to draw near. So if you're out there and you're saying, man, I really want a mentor, when you identify somebody, you have to be willing to pay whatever price it is. If you want like Tony Robbins to mentor you, or you want Garrett to mentor you, like Garrett's not in a place where he can take on mentorship people. So like you should pay him for coaching. And you may think that that's like, oh, that's not fair. He should just be into me. No. Hear what we're saying. If you want to be mentored, you need to pay whatever price it takes to be around that person. And it's up to you to go and get the mentorship that you are seeking. Now, here's how you know if it's an alignment. Draw close to me, or draw close to God and he'll draw close to you. If you draw close and that person doesn't draw close to you, then fair enough. That's probably not going to be like a lifelong alignment for you, but it is still something that you can be mentored by and learn from. And so I just want to encourage people. The encouraging thing about this is that you can go out and find mentors, but don't like have this need for them to have to like love you and validate you. You're not looking for you're not going to get a parent. There's a difference, and Garrett's going to get into it.
And that's the difference between a mentor and a father.
Yeah.
Right. What a mentor is they're someone that you can follow. Mm-hmm. What a father is a father who's someone who's dedicated to you.
Yes.
And raising you up. Right. If you father children, when they're born, you're their only mentor.
Right.
Whether you're a good mentor or bad.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to imitate you, and your job is to love them. And that's the difference between a mentor and a father. All fathers are mentors, not all mentors are fathers, right? And as you grow up, maybe you didn't have a great father, right? And so you get that love. The love that you receive is love from God, and you've found other people to fill that mentorship role. Ideally, a father is someone who can be a mentor to you. My father is a mentor to me. Your father is someone who can be a mentor to you, and your father is someone who unconditionally loves you. Yeah. Right. And that's peak definition of what a father is. Our fathers are all going to fall short in that way, or fall short in what it means to be a father in some way or another. They're not going to be perfect in that. Maybe you have a dad who loves you really well, and you've replaced the mentorship role that he plays with somebody else. But your father deeply cares about you, and you just realized maybe my father's not my mentor anymore, but I still love my dad, and my dad loves me. Right? But that's really the difference between a mentor and a father, is that a father is dedicated to the progenitor, the person that he's raising up. Father's dedicated to this person. Hey, I love you, and even when you're being a ding dong, I'm gonna help you anyways. And I'm because of my love for you and our relationship, I'm gonna stand in this mentorship role with you and help you mature.
Yeah. And you said when we were planning this podcast that we could have a whole separate podcast on defining what unconditional love is. But because I said to you, I was like, it's important that you think you understand what we mean when we say unconditional love. And the example you gave was the prodigal son, which I think is actually really important for people to understand. Like, because I think how this could go in somebody's mind if they have a need for a father and they don't realize it, is they identify someone as a mentor that they want to be a father, and then they go twist off and act crazy, and then they're mad at the person that they identify as their father because they didn't chase after them. Like, hey, you weren't there for me when I need you. And what you said is like, no, the prodigal son's father was there when he came back. He didn't chase after him. He let him go learn his lessons. And
don't have an expectation of a mentor that he's a father to you, because they're not the same thing. Yeah. But then also understand what a father's role is, and a father's role is to mature you. Yeah. Father's role is to love you, but loving you doesn't mean acceptance, and loving you doesn't mean, and again, we could get into the depth of what all of that is, but loving you also doesn't mean chasing you all over the place. Yeah. Right. You have to want the training, and that's what happens with what prodigal son unconditional love looks like. Is the son goes off and is a ding dong, and then he comes back, and the father says, "I'm so glad you're here. Now we can get back to work."
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, I hope that's been helpful for everybody, because I think that's
what I wanted this to be was just a framework that people can realize, like, hey, respect your teachers, learn from them, don't model them. Yeah. Respect your heroes. Learn from them. They have so much to teach you. They'll also encourage you. They'll inspire you. But sometimes they'll give you bad advice. Yeah. Right? You shouldn't do everything that a hero says. You shouldn't do everything that a teacher says. But you should listen to your mentors. And so, again, those are few. doesn't mean you can't listen to what your teachers say. It means you need to be more careful in what you hear from a teacher. You need to be more careful in what you hear from a hero. And this also highlights the importance of finding a mentor.
Very good.